Okay, yeah, as Jeremy said, my name's Oliver Davis. I'm an engineer in Vika. I've been there almost 2 years. I was quite surprised that it's been almost 2 years already. And yeah, I did a talk at the last, I don't know if I can say last for now, PHP North West conference. So yeah, I did find my thing, yeah, with the thing on. So I'll keep that on my shelf next to my elephants, yeah. And yeah, interestingly, the talk I gave there was on deploying PHP with Fabric. So another DevOpsy type talk. This one's about more local development, although not exclusively local development, I guess. But yeah, we mostly use it for local development. Not, I mostly use it for local development, probably should we say. So yeah, other than my day job in Vika, I'm one of the organisers of the PHP South Wales meetup. We do meetups like this on Zoom, but usually in person in Cardiff, hopefully eventually again in Cardiff. They're on the last Thursday of every month. So yeah, we'd love to see people at those meetups. Let me just move Zoom over here. There's a slight lag on my screen. Hope that's okay for everybody. Okay, so what is Workspace? As Jeremy said, it's a tool that we use and maintain in Vika. It was built by our DevOps team. I assume it was there when when I started. My job there is working on projects, so I don't work directly on the DevOps team. So I'm more of a consumer of this tool, I guess, than a creator or maintainer of it. I do submit some patches sort of upstream, as it were. But yeah, I was quite keen to sort of figure out a bit more about it underneath the hood. And when PHP Southwest wanted some lightning talks, I thought I'd submit a talk there. And then this is sort of an expanded version of that. And yeah, we primarily use it for building and managing our Docker Compose based local environments. So it's not all about local development. I tend to use it on some projects as just like a makefile replacement. So a tool for running commands on projects. And when I say commands, I don't mean sort of Symfony console or Drush commands. I mean sort of bash scripts or makefile type commands. So it's built on Symfony, so it uses a number of Symfony components under the hood. I've got a list here. This is config, console, it's used back for the CLI tool, dependency injection, the expression language, which I hadn't come across before looking at this, or hadn't used rather, Symfony Finder, and then YAML, and also uses Twig for templating that we'll see later on. And it's an open source MIT licensed tool. It's all available on the not on the Invika repo, but on the My127 repo organization. Yeah, you can use it to write to execute custom commands for your project. So rather than running something like make build, you're going to run WS build or whatever you need for your project. So this is really useful for long commands you need to run. So like your Docker compose, run minus rm exec php composer require whatever. So we can really shorten that down into a much smaller, repeatable command. And I'm just using Docker as an example. So I use it for Ansible commands quite a lot. So if I want to run like an Ansible playbook deploy.yaml type command, again, I can shorten that using a workspace command. I guess most people are familiar with makefiles. So you have a file with various targets. So commands, we run something like make build, and that will run the longer command. Or I've seen bash scripts used for the same thing. So bash scripts with a big switch, and you run so dev.sh space build space whatever. So yeah, this is a nicer approach to this sort of thing, and a nicer one, I think, so far. Some features, commands, as I said, we can write our own custom commands. If we find that there's a lot of repetition, we can extract functions. Attributes are essentially variables with a nice benefit of we can encrypt and decrypt them, which is something I don't think we can really do with makefiles. It's not something that I've looked into. We use it for generating configuration files, so things like Docker file or your Docker compose file, or if you're doing a Drupal site, maybe your settings.php gets generated from a file. And there are also some global services. There's one for logging using Kibana, which I haven't used yet. I don't think I have. I can't recall using it. It's using Mailhog for intercepting local mail. So that's there we can use. and then proxy with traffic, I believe it's pronounced traffic proxy. So how do we install it? We just get it from GitHub. We just go to the My127 organization and the Workspace repo. Go to the downloads page, and then the current version is 0.1.3. It's been that version for a little while, but when we did a training with our team, the impression is that the Workspace itself is pretty much feature complete. So I'm not sure what the roadmap is towards getting a 1.0 release, but this seems pretty stable to me. Then we just need to make it executable. So we chmod plus X to make it executable, and then move it into our bin directory so we can execute it. And once we've done that, we can run this, just run the WS command, and this is what we get by default. So very Symfony console-ish output. And by default, we get global, create, and secret. So we'll look at some of those in a minute. But yeah, nothing custom here right now. So in our first example, we'll look at how we could replace a makefile potentially. So let's look first of all at running commands. So this is a file called workspace.yaml. So it's a YAML file. And then you can add extra files like workspace.override.yaml, and they sort of layer over the top of each other in the same way the Docker compose files do. Lines 3 and 4 here, optional. I don't, from every project, I haven't had a problem doing that on some of my own little personal things. But it's probably best practice, so I thought I should do it if I'm putting slides. So first of all, we need to name our workspace. So this is, my website is oliverdavis.uk. So that's what I put in here. And I've given it a description. So it's my code base. And the workspace name and the description of the things become available as metadata later on if we need to use them in templates and things. And then line 6 down, we've defined a command. So I've defined the same command here twice, once in Bash and once in PHP. So you can swap out the interpreter. I think to anything. I've only done it with Bash and PHP, and they're the ones that are documented on the page. But I guess you could change that to be anything, and it would work. So using the keyword command here in both examples, and the command is just called say hello. We define our little opening shebang. Here on line 7 is Bash and line 11 is PHP, and then it's going to echo out hello world in both examples. So if we run our WS command again now, we see we've got the say hello subcommand that's been available. And that's just from adding that command line into our Workspace or YAML file. Excuse me. There's two little helper functions here that we can use. One is called run, and one is called pass through, PASSTHRU. It took me a little while to spell that correctly to begin with. And these are just little helper functions, as well as just saying echo. We can say run echo or pass through echo. The only difference really being is run will sort of hide the output and swallow all the output, so you don't see it, which is useful if you've got really commands that output a lot of output. And if you did want to see the output, you could just run pass through, and it will pass through the output back to you. At least that's the way I think of it. So as I say, I don't maintain this tool. I don't really work on a day-to-day, so a lot of this is down to my sort of interpretation. DevOps guys might say something different. They might say, oh, no, it's called pass-through because of reasons. But yeah, I sort of think of it as that's why it's called pass-through. And yeah, we can see here the directory name that we're running it in, which is useful. And also we see the command that it's actually running. So if you're going to run ws drush something, you can see the actual command. So it's pre-running docker compose run php drush something. So yeah, that's quite nice for debugging if you want to see exactly what it is that's actually being run under the hood. And then there's a little square next to each one. You can see on the first one it's blue. Typically I've seen them be sort of green and red if you're running tests. So I guess it's based on the error code or the status code you get back from the command, which is quite nice. So as I said, we can use attributes, which are sort of variables, I guess. So in this case, we're going to move our message into a variable, into an attribute. So we use the attribute keyword this time, and we give it a name, which is message, and we just move the value of our message up into the attribute. And then in our command, we need to include the little pipe separator to enable for it to work. Sorry, after the bash on line 4, there we see we've got a pipe and then the @sign filter. So that's going to enable us to have access to the variables. So just say @ so it's sort of an alias for print or something, I guess. And that's just going to get the message from the attribute above and just echo it out in exactly the same way. So it's the same command we just saw previously. We just extracted the message out to an attribute to make things a little bit cleaner and more reusable. So you can also add arguments. I think one of the nice things is you can also name space separate the command names. So I wanted to be say hello, I could just say space hello, and that would work in the same way. I think that's just a bit cleaner than when I've done this with a make file. I have to have everything is something dash something dash something. This makes this a lot easier. And I've had some issues trying to get arguments to work in this way, also with make files, which is a bit tricky. So yeah, I like this approach. We can just, in this case, we've got a named variable here called name. Okay, which is quite, so this is quite similar to defining a Symfony console command, I think. So as well as saying on line 3 here, we got our echo. So we're going to echo our message again from the attribute that we saw previously. And then we're going to say from, and then input the name here. So the name that we pass into our command. And that's a slightly different syntax. Uses Symfony expression language syntax here. So the equals and then the curly braces. And then we've got our input.argument name. So yeah, I think this is sort of a Symfony console make file hybrid twig thing, which is my really non-technical description of this. And I'm sure one of the DevOps team was probably holding his head in his hands who listened to me explain this in this way. You can also use environment variables. So our structure here for our command looks slightly differently. We can introduce the exec keyword here at line 5 and just put our command inside this exec key. We can use the env key to make our environment variables. So move our message this time into an environment variable using the same expression language syntax. So equals @message, and then also the name of the person or the name of the person. We use our input.argument again. It just means that now those two variables are available inside the command on line 7, but also if we were to call an external file, which I do if it's something that's quite long, you would actually want to have it to run another bash file. It's inside your container or somewhere. Those will be available there as well. Okay, so secrets. The first thing to say about these is I've shortened them to get them to fit onto a slide. I think they're about twice as long. So if anybody's looking at this and going, it's only 53 characters or something, it's a total guess at the number of characters, but thinking that's probably not very secure, so it's not very long, then yeah, it was double this. So just FYI. So for secrets, first of all, we need a default key. So that secret command that we saw right at the beginning that was there by default, we can use that to generate a random key, which will become our default key. So normally that will go into the workspace.override.yaml file. That gets ignored so that it doesn't get committed, because this is our sort of our private key, I guess, in this instance. And also put it into something like LastPass or a password manager, so it's there for everybody. Let's use that as our base for when we run secret encrypt on the next line here. It's going to look at our random generated secret private key and then encrypt it using that. And then we can then use the decrypt function and then pass through the encrypted value into the decrypt function. It will decrypt it on the fly. So this is just encrypting the string, but we use it a lot for getting things off AWS or getting things off S3 bucket or something like that. Yeah, S3 bucket, that's what I meant. So things that you wouldn't want to put in plain text in a make file, we can encrypt them here again using this syntax, which is quite nice. Okay, so let's look at an example. This is very much from the make file sort of perspective so far. I gave a talk last week, I think it was last week, about a tool called RST to PDF that I've been using to do my slide decks for the last couple of talks that I've done. It takes a restructured text file and then converts it into a PDF file. So I've been using a Workspace file since giving that talk. I thought it would be fun to try and sort of merge the two talks together in a way. So I was going to use a make file, and I just took this command that I was running every time. It's just in the README file. I thought I could use a Workspace file to do this. So the other way of defining attributes is to have an attributes key. Rather than having attributes singular and then a name, you can just define attributes as one in one go. And this one made an RST to PDF section, parent, tree. I'm not sure what the right word is I'm looking for here, but I'll see the PDF, and then I've got a command. So this is quite a long command. So I broke it over several lines. You can see about halfway down here, I've got the file name. So defining the name that the RST file should have and the PDF file should have. And then putting those into the command above. So it starts with RST to PDF and then concatenating with the tilde. So very sort of twig-like. Then getting my RST file name. So slides to RST, then define some things at the break level. You can go and watch my talk on RST to PDF to figure out what that does. Just taking this sort of quite long command, lots of options here, putting it into something reusable, so I can just run a command to execute it. I've also got a file name here for a thumbnail, so it's generating a thumbnail for the slides as well. So the attribute's done. I've added some commands. So PDF space generate space talk. So we can space separate the names here. So that's quite nice. And they show up as, if I just ran WS here, I'd see PDF, and then I could WS PDF and it give me the subcommand. So I quite like having that structure rather than just a flat PDF dash generate dash something or dash watch. In the same way we had the name earlier on as the named argument, here I've got the talk. So for me, this is just the directory structure. So each talk is in a directory. We're just going to cd into the directory and take the talk name from the argument, and then run the pass-through command that we helper from we saw earlier on, and then get that command from the beginning. So this command that we defined here, we're just putting that in as RST to PDF dot command. They're all accessible through dot notation, which is quite nice. So for one-off, I can just run PDF generate, working with Workspace, just be really meta. Or if I want to watch for changes and recompile on every change, I use a tool called Node. I think it's NodeMon, but there's discussions about how you pronounce that. And I use that to watch the files. I'm looking for the RST, looking for the style sheet, looking for the text file, and then just saying run that PDF command again. So rather than having to run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines here, or 6 commands or arguments, I can now just run WS PDF generate talk, and it will do it all for me, or watch. The other one that I've done is I've made the command for generating thumbnails. So this guy just called thumbnail talk. So here I'm using some environment variables. If no other reason, just to keep things a little bit cleaner in my command, because this one's a little bit longer. So I'm getting the PDF file name. So it's always slides to PDF, regardless of which directory it's in, at least for now. And then the thumbnail file name. So I'm making those two environment variables before executing the command. And then, it's just going to run this GS. So I think that's Ghost script command that just takes the first slide and makes it a JPEG or a PDF. I think it's no, sorry. First of all, it's a PNG, or not PDF. Too many things to start with. That's a P for me. Okay, so let's move on here to configuration files. So there's another option here called confd. So given we've got some attributes, I've got one here called Drupal and then a doc-root one. So my Drupal directory is inside a web directory here, this example, which is pretty common these days if you're doing Drupal 8 or Drupal 9 development and using the recommended template. They suggest the Drupal directory goes inside web now, which is good for security and things. So given I've got some attributes, I'm going to make a new command called apply config. And this one's a PHP command, as we can see here on line 6, using the PHP interpreter. And we're just going to call a confd method here, and then give it the name of our directory. So it's workspace.confd. and then it's going to apply. So it's basically going to say, apply the conf-d command to these files. And then the files are, sorry, the files are listed here on line 9 down. So we're going to say this directory here, each one has a source and an optional destination. So this is a vhost.com file. This is an Nginx template. It's a twig file, but the twig extension is sort of assumed. And then my destination is going to be this directory here. So I usually have a .my127ws directory. That's pretty standard. And inside that directory, I'm going to make another one called Docker and one called Nginx. And then the file vhost.conf will become default.conf. So let's see what that means. So this is the source file. This is that vhost.conf or twig file. And here I'm going to make my virtual host for this Nginx. So this could be going to a Docker container. It could be going onto any Nginx config, in fact. Because it's a twig file and we have access to all of our attributes and functions, rather than hard coding in the root. So I'm going to say put all the Drupal stuff into /app, and then we've got our doc root directory again, which is /web. But rather than hard coding in /web, we're going to say get the Drupal.docroot value attribute and insert it here instead. So let me just go back here. So we've got our Drupal.docroot attribute, Drupal.docroot attribute, and then when we run that apply config command, we'll end up with our default.conf file, which just has the web thing in the right place. So this is a pretty simple example of how this works, but this is very useful for Docker files or Docker compose file, in fact. So normally we'll have a twig version of those, and then when someone checks out the project, we run a command like apply config, or that'll get run behind the scenes. It will generate all the files based on the attributes. So maybe like our PHP version and our Drupal docroot things that'll change per project get set per attribute, and then everybody just generate the file. And after that point, like we're pretty much in a pretty normal sort of Docker compose type environment. As I said, it doesn't have to be Docker. I've done this with Symphony Server. I've done it with some Sculpin sites. I don't have to run a Sculpin vendor bin, Sculpin generate --watch -server, if I remember rightly. So again, I can really condense this down, but we use it for Docker primarily. So yeah, it doesn't have to be all Docker. So yeah, I thought what would be fun, actually, this is going to get on live demo time, is I thought I'd have go at Workspace my site as a demo. So there's a PR on my GitHub, on my website repo, which is public. And I thought I'd go through the steps of workspacing it. Typically we use this with another tool called Harness, which is, again, DevOps guys are probably holding their head in their hands, just pre-configured Docker files. I think that's the way to think of them. So we've got a Drupal one and a Magento one and a Symfony one and some Go ones. So again, yeah, probably really again oversimplifying what that actually is, but that's my interpretation. For this demo, I wanted to ignore those. I didn't want to just say pull in like Harness Drupal 8 or something, just have it sort of work out of the box. And as I said, I was really keen just to sort of learn more about how this worked. So I thought I'd start from scratch and just go from build it all up myself, at least as far as I needed. So I thought we'd let's see if I'm on the right workspace here. Okay, so hopefully we can see VS Code. There we go. I get confused which editor I'm using today. That's not good. Where's my mouse? There we go. So as I said, there is a PR that's open. In fact, I think it's workspace.link/workspacing. I should just look at my last slide because I know it's on there. There we go. Okay. So yeah, I'm using a tool called DDEV, which is a pretty common Docker-based local environment. Pretty commonly in the Drupal space, but I know they support other things as well. So that's what I'm using for now. Works really well. I really like it. I don't know if I'll be keeping this long term. There are some things from DDEV that I ended up taking out. It has like a PHP admin container I never use, so I take that out and I override some things on every install, but that's by the way. Let's see, so yeah, my first step was to remove ddev, right? That makes sense. And yeah, as I said, I started off with this. I didn't want to go in and go the full hog straight away. So I decided just to do this for the Docker file just to begin with. So I've got some things in my git ignore file here. So I'm going to, it's ignoring everything here by default. So I have to unignore it. This is my Docker file. So I'm going to use PHP 7.4 FPM as a base. I'm pretty self-taught with Docker, so there's probably some things in here that people are more familiar with it than me. I've watched a fair amount of Chris Tankersy videos and other people's. Oh, the other guy's name has gone from my head now, but there we are. I'll remember it afterwards. Putting in Composer here on so I'm doing some layering. This isn't a Docker talk, but this is using multi-stage builds. So extending from my base, which is PHP FPM. There's one I call dev. So doing some updating and adding some things like PV is quite a nice utility. People haven't used it before. Just sort of cat in a file and it'll display as a progress bar of what it's doing. So use it for importing databases quite a lot. Could be some Composer things. So yeah, this is all pretty like normal-ish Docker stuff. There's no workspace here yet. That's what I'm trying to get to. So this is just normal Docker Composer.yaml file. Let's see. I got a little Nginx container. Then the settings of Docker files. I've just added in a Drupal settings file here for my database credentials. Loading this in. And had to make a small webpack on change to get that to work. So again, nothing too crazy happening right now. Just a pretty normal Docker setup. Added our workspace file, so really simple. It's coming back into my TDD type thinking, a minimum viable workspace file. I wonder if I press this, would it take me to the next one? Nice, yeah, very good, that's good. So I added a couple of really simple commands here. So I've added one for enable and disable. They're pretty common. So they're by default on most of our projects. They probably do more stuff than this. The enable one definitely does. But for me, I just wanted to use Docker Compose up, build, and then down build. So they're my really simple enable disable commands. I am passing through the namespace here. So this Oliver Davis UK becomes my Docker Compose project name, just to make sure everything works properly. Yeah, so if it's in a different directory, it gets called something else. It doesn't match the container name. I added an exec command here with another argument. So this one's not named, but this is sort of a wildcard, greedy wildcard command here. So yeah, anything that I pass to exec something, it's just going to go through to Docker Compose exec and just run it inside PHP and then add those arguments onto the end. So I could run something like ws exec PHP -v and just to run the thing in the container that tells it which version of PHP we're running. I added one for Composer. So this is just going to use that exec command that we just mentioned. Do exec Composer, pass through the same arguments here, same argument, wildcard % argument. Adding for Drush, again, pretty much the same thing, just leveraging database exec here that I did in the previous step. I'm just going to pass through whatever arguments here. And because we're adding this pipe and the filter here, we're able to use this syntax inside the command. If we didn't do that, we get a Symfony parse error or something like that. Yeah, one for PHP unit, same thing again. Just run the binary inside the container. Here are some attributes for my front end, for my theme build. So here's the path to my theme, and here's how I'm going to install its dependencies, and here are the commands I'm going to run. So Symfony has dev and prod mode. So I've added some aliases for those, which you can see here. Okay, I'm just going to run Docker Compose RM. So yeah, I'd have to run this. If I wanted to just compile these assets every time, I'd have to run Docker Compose RM, run RM, W for setting the work directory, node/whatever node npm run build. So that's going to take me a long time, right? If I'm going to want to run that by hand every time I do something. So yeah, much quicker just to run ws frontend dev. Frontend build is going to just run the build version, so it runs the production version. Install is going to run the install commands that we saw, so it's npm ci. Yeah, and I've got another one that does watching. So these are just redelegate into the package JSON file that's in my theme. It's going to run some npm scripts. Let's see here, install. Yeah, this is my initial install. Install my composer dependencies, install my theme dependencies, build the theme. So that's something I would run on every project. So yeah, fresh clone here. I'm just going to install everything to get some up and running. Yeah, here's I think where it gets a little bit more interesting. So yeah, here I decided to go a little bit more up a level, as it were, in terms of complexity. So what I decided to do is make use that conf.d thing that we saw, and yeah, move a Docker compose YAML file into conf.d. So rather than me just having it sat in my project now, I'm going to be able to build it using the twig that we saw before. So I'm going to do this in my Docker compose and my Docker file. And yeah, again, this is the same apply config file command that we saw previously. Where are those files? Here they are, I think. Yes, I can unignore the compile version. And yeah, I'm just going to move them. So my Docker file is now moved to dockerfile.twig inside this directory. So again, this is just a convention. Normally it goes into tools, workspace, and I've put them into conf.d. Or maybe that's what I come up with that. I can't remember. Tools workspace is definitely a convention. Most of our stuff goes in there. So yeah, I'm going to move that Docker file and the Docker compose file there. There's no changes here, so I've not made any changes to them yet. They're just the same as they were. Doing the same thing for the Nginx config. I'm making a slight update here to the name. Adding it into this conf.d sort of object. So yeah, our vhost.conf becomes tools.docker.images, and it pulls that in here. So this is our mapping. So we're just going to take that compile file and put it into here. So Workspace is going to take the twig file, build the real file, and then we're going to mount the real file into Docker to have it do its thing. Yeah, moved our Drupal doc root into an attribute. So this is where we start really customizing stuff. So yeah, everything previously was hard coded to app/web or something/web. You know, this project is web. Let's say we've got one that uses doc root or one that uses public or something. We're going to try and make these things as customizable as possible. And the actual harness built images are pretty much like you can just do most stuff with attributes. You don't really have to go in and add commands very often, unless they're ones for like little helpers and things. So yeah, most stuff we're able to do with attributes in this sort of way because of this. Yeah, so in our workspace YAML file, here's my attribute. So I'm just saying Drupal.docroot is web. And then in the twig file, yeah, we're able to use twig double curly brace syntax, then use @ to get to our attributes. @ for attributes, again, that's the way I think of it. Drupal.docroot. So yeah, if I was to change this to docroot, when I rerun the apply config command, it will make a new Docker file with docroot and a new Docker compose file with docroot. Yeah, doing the same thing in the Docker file here for the PHP version. So rather than hard coding in 7.4, we'll make that another attribute. So yeah, we replace that with PHP version, and then also the MySQL image. Yep. So this one's using MariaDB. It could be MySQL, it could be something else. So we can make that configurable as well. And then rather than hard coding in MariaDB 10, we'll pass through the MySQL image and then the MySQL version. Likewise, the node version, and then we'll just add them into our attributes array inside the workspace file again. So yeah, if I was to copy and paste this into another different project, and that one used 7.3 or 8.0, then I could, yeah, just change it here, rebuild everything, and it would work. Let's see, I think we're almost at the end here. So yeah, we'd move our settings or Docker file into a twig template. We could do this with environment variables too. That's probably better way of doing it. But for the purpose of this example, we'll just pull the attributes again straight from here. So rather than hard coding in Drupal everywhere, this is fine. It's for a local environment, right? So I wouldn't do that in production, honest. Just pass to our database now. Password again. Let's see. Yeah, there's our new attributes, and there's our source file. Again, this is relative to this directory here. So settings.local to PHP. And if I didn't specify this destination, it would just output into the same directory again, but we don't want that. We want it to be inside websites default. I think we're done with the commits here. Yeah, we just extracted some things out. So because this is YAML, we could do some includes. So this is just moving confd and moving the apply config command and the attribute here. Then sort of the common commands, like we'd have disable and enable at every project and exec. So this is just moving those out into these separate files here. So config.yaml and commands.yaml. And then, yeah, bottom here, we scroll down. Yeah, you can just do an import here for everything inside the config directory, just import it and include it there. So this is just tidying things up, really. And then, yeah, something I found recently, okay, 2 days ago, is that one of the global services is the traffic proxy, which like we use it on projects, but I didn't sort of know it was there by default for everything. So yeah, when I did this in the previous step, I was able to map a port. So port 80 in the container becomes 8080 or 8081 locally, which is fine until you end up with clashing ports and things. So yeah, I looked into using traffic before. When I played with this, I was sort of went off it a little bit because I thought I had to maintain my own reverse proxy image, which isn't a big thing, but I have to have that. But yeah, now it's there by default, and that's quite nice as well. Yeah, get my workspace name. This maybe could be namespace as well. One is DNS friendly and one isn't. I think the namespace is, so I probably should change that. Yeah, it's going to use that workspace name. So oliverdavis.uk, oliver-uk that we set right at the top at the beginning. It's going to use that for the back end and then the first part of the host. So it'll become oliver-uk.my127.site. And there we need to add some labels, define some networks. Yeah, so it will add a traffic network for you when you run the command. Yeah, so there we go. And then yeah, in my settings local file, rather than it being on localhost now, it's going to be on namespace dot whatever. So again, this is a twig file, so we can do whatever we want to do. So I think we've finished with the impromptu code review. That took a little bit longer than expected, so thanks for bearing with me there. This is the site. This is the last commit of the things I was doing. So yeah, this is the domain. So yeah, Oliver Davis. Yeah, I think it's that. So yeah, nothing here at all at the moment. So hopefully this goes well. So let's see if we can boot it up. So nothing's running right now. So no commands running. And I think, in fact, because this is, what did I change it to? Maybe. Yeah, it's okay. Okay. So yeah, if I run WS, I have some commands here. So we have global and enable, disable, like the things that we just saw. So yeah, pretty much everything we just saw in that, well, yeah, everything we just saw in that PR is in this file that we've wanted to show you, so know what's there. Yeah, so I can run WS enable. Oh, actually, what I should do first is run this. WS global. Sorry, I move this up so you can see what's going on. Yeah, there we go. WS global. Man, I can't type. Service proxy enable global service proxy. Yeah. So this will boot up the global traffic container. So again, yeah, this isn't Docker talk per se, but yeah, a fair bit of Docker here. So yeah, this wasn't running before, so we didn't have this proxy running. So now we do. And in fact, we should be able to go to my127.site and see traffic running. So yeah, I don't know if anybody's seen this before. This is pretty cool. It took me a little while to get it running. First of all, I tried doing it myself. So it's nice that it's here. That's it. So this is our default host, myman27.site. That's the site I'm looking at right now. So I think it's one of those domains that points back to localhost by default, which is why I'm able to see it. But there's nothing project specific here at all. So nothing to do with my site. So we run this enable. In fact, we don't even, I deleted everything. Let's see. Okay, good. Good. So yeah, we run it enable. It's going to run Docker Compose up -d build. It's going to build my containers and run them in the background. But wait, we don't have a Docker Compose YAML file. Shock horror. So yeah, we do have tools, workspace, conf.d. So these is where my twig files live. So yeah, our Docker Compose file has our variables in it. So like our Drupal doc root, and let's find another one here. Let's go to the top. Yeah, workspace name and everything. So let's run WS again. WS, as I said, this is nice. We just do WS apply. And there's our config. So we can run the config. Just giving any output, interestingly. It'd be nice if it said, here are the files that you've run that it's generated. I will suggest that as a PR. Or it's open source, so anybody, if I can do that. But I might do that when I have some downtime next. So we have some files here that we didn't have before. We have our Docker file, our Docker Compose file. So it's taken the twig files, compiled them, pulled in all the attributes, replaced all the strings, and generated these versions for us. So yeah, here we don't have the variables and things. So yeah, this is a Docker Compose file that we can use. And in fact, if we didn't ignore this, we could commit it to the project, and then like no one would ever know. Like it would just be a normal Docker Compose environment at this point. Yeah, again, we just go actually in the Docker file as well. There's our 7.4. So yeah, if we did change the PHP version, or yeah, put this on another project, then it would, we could change it. So now let's run enable again. It's going to run our build command because we're running the pass through. No, this is running run, I think. So we're not seeing any output actually. That's fine. Hopefully it's going to start. It started this afternoon. I tried it at lunchtime. So I'm hoping it's going to start, but, live demos. Doesn't usually take this long. I'm starting to get nervous. So let's see. If not, we could do some live debugging. That'd be fun. It's taking its time. Okay, let's start again. Oh, he's doing something. Maybe I'm just impatient. It's building everything from scratch. Maybe I actually got rid of the images before. That'll be annoying. I thought it was going to get them from cache again like I did last time. Maybe I clean them or something. It's fine. I'll just give it a second. Let's see, whilst that's running, let's see what else in here that we could have a look at potentially. We saw PHP unit before. What I'm going to do, just to make this a little bit easier, sorry for everybody. Where's our enable command? Config commands, disable, run. So if we make this pass through, we should see a bit more of what's going on. There we go. At least we can see exactly what it's doing. building the PHP container. That's interesting. There should already be a PHP container that's there from before. Of course, it's doing this while it's doing screen sharing and things, so it's gonna. Oh, there we go. Let's give this a second. So you can see it's running our multi-stage build. Yeah, it's copied everything in, installed those extra things that we need. And step 6, just copied Composer from the official Composer image. It should be Composer 2. So yeah, it seems to be when it's copying everything in, that's what's taking the time. This is on a Linux machine as well. It should be faster than this. Screen sharing doesn't help either, I suppose. Excuse me. Throat's a bit dry. Okay, so it's done. So hopefully, if I go back and run, clear this again. Docker PS. Okay, we have some more containers. This is good. I think crisis averted there, although maybe counting my chickens before we hatch, because live demos are fun. So we have our proxy. We have our Nginx container, our PHP, and our MySQL. So hopefully I can go here. I thought I stepped on the cat's tail, but I didn't. Okay, and we got our site. So page not found is sort of expected. I've not, yeah, this is a basic version of this site. So yeah, I can run things like WS drush, if I could type list maybe. Yeah, these are all the drush commands it's going to run that are available to us. Also not set a tmux session. That's confusing my muscle memory. Okay. Yeah, so we can run WS drush list. So it's going to pass list as an argument into our command, and this is the actual command that it's going to run. It's WS exec docker compose exec PHP container this command with our option. And again, if we're going to run where's my last one? Yeah, anything, we can add options and they'll all get passed through to our container. Yes, that's quite nice. Yeah, as I said, this proxy is something I found really recently, the last couple of days, which I think is really nice. And yeah, we don't need, let's say again, it doesn't need to be Docker. Yeah, we just typically will use it for Docker. But then yeah, if I did want to, let's see if I change one of these files quickly, because I realized that's probably killed most of my time with demos being fun. Workspace YAML. So yeah, let's change some things in here. Let's just check that they do update. So yeah, quickly, if we just do exec, just clear it again, that's right, exec PHP -v. So this is running 7.4 as we'd expect. So actually, I don't know what will happen if I do this. So this will be fun. Let's go into our file and change our PHP version. And let's change this to like 8.0. I'll be honest, I have no idea what's going to happen. I've not done this before. Apply config. So it's going to regenerate those files for us. So the now should all be 8 rather than 7.4. PHP. Nope, I'm in the wrong file. Yeah, 8. Interestingly, it's 8, not 8.0. It's probably YAML. YAML doing that. Run that again. Okay, I think that's right. I think that's what we need. Let's run the name here. Yeah, I'm curious to see what's going to happen. Yeah, so this is really useful. Yeah, if we do want to add another module to our Drupal app using Composer, just run WS Composer require and it'll do it rather than running docker exec run rm bin composer. Yeah, much nicer. And yeah, like I use Ansible to deploy my site, and that's running Ansible and Ancestrana, and that's not quite as long a command. It's my Ansible playbook deploys like YAML dash secret or something like that as well. So yeah, being able to run something like this is quite nice, although GitHub Actions runs it now. So it's gonna have to build my container again using PHP 8. Give this a second. Let's have it now whilst that's running. Okay. So there are some references here. So this is the GitHub repo. This is where the Workspace utility itself lives. This is the demo that I did when I did this talk, like a lightning version of this talk for PHP Southwest. And yeah, the PR where I've been playing with this on my home site is on workspacing-sites, and I'll take you through to the PR. Yeah, my website is down here, and you can find all my social details there, Twitter and GitHub and LinkedIn and Drupal.org accounts. And also the slides for this talk are on there as well, embedded on the talks page already. So let that run for a few minutes. I don't know, Jeremy, if there's any questions whilst we let this run.
I'm not aware of any from Facebook at the moment. I've got a couple of questions as I've been going through, and if there's anybody in Zoom has a question, just come on camera for starters, and then we can get you on the audio as well. So from what you've described so far, this seems to be like a glue wrapper around a lot of the other tools that you would naturally use anyway.
Yeah.
So things like Bash, Ansible, even Symfony console, things that you might write as part of the application. But this, I'm just trying to understand how you view it as where the boundaries are between components, if you will. Because obviously, whenever you introduce a new technology, the hardest thing is to identify the kind of boundaries or what its edge of responsibility is. So for me, obviously, things like Symfony console, you often write tools in Symfony console that are the Swiss Army utility things to do with your application specifically. Where would Workspace sit around tools like that? Would you just not now write them in Symfony console? Would you migrate simpler things into Workspace, or would you do some sort of hybrid? Does that responsibility slider move left to right, between say Symfony console and Workspace, or say Workspace and Ansible? Is there a kind of, do you find there's a natural kind of boundary between those tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I guess, I'm probably still trying to figure that out for myself. And like, I've used this on a couple of projects, mostly Drupal projects, I think. I think I've used it on anything else. But I'm still writing sort of drush commands, CLI commands, like sort of Drupal specific ones. Like even for this site, I'm using Tailwind CSS on this website, and it purges all the CSS when it does a build. So it takes megs of CSS down to a couple of kilobytes of CSS. So that's a different tool. But it does that by scanning through the templates, and if it doesn't find a class, it strips it out. So I've got a drush command that will go through. I've got a couple of commands that are still in some of the body text from when I moved this across from Sculpin back into Drupal. So there's still a couple of them there. So I've got a command that will just scan through the database tables and sort of export them into a file that PHPNW can use. So to me, that sort of sits inside sort of the website domain, I guess, one for a better phrase. I'm probably not using that out of context, but like for me, I'd probably think of Workspace more like the infrastructure side of things, like actual commands that I'm running, like around Docker or around Ansible, so those types of tools. Because I thought if something was more application specific, I'd probably keep it there. But that's an interesting thing. I've sort of had the same sort of thought actually before. And I guess, yeah, as I sort of carry on using it more, yeah, some of our projects, it's on our team. We've got a lot of projects on our team. And yeah, it's sort of slowly, some of them are still using Lando, which is like another tool. So I guess I'm using that. I'm sort of 50-50. Most of it all depends which project I'm working on at the time. So yeah, maybe as I use this more on different projects and more in different scenarios, I'll think of a better answer.
Do you think there's any kind of mileage as well? Obviously, you were using the Twig templates as a way to kind of boilerplate the Docker config files.
Yeah.
One of the things I've noticed in teams that I've worked with is that the variation between people's understanding of Docker depends on the quality of the Docker file that you're going to get to actually spin up the local environments. And so you find that there's, people who've only just started to learn Docker will not separate everything out. They'll do these hybrid monstrosities where it's Apache PHP MySQL Docker image, and it's just like, well, that's not the point.
All the things image,
all the things image, and those sort of things. But at least they're using Docker, so that's always a win. So don't slate them too hard. But would you say that there's mileage in using something like Workspace to standardize the generation of things for people who are less familiar with the underlying tool? You teach them Workspace and some of those kind of common commands like enable, disable, and config, apply, and that kind of thing. And then you can basically hide away the more complex parts of the infrastructure generation if they're not familiar with those underlying tools. To just provide them within your team, you say, right, workspaces are how you get up and running standard, and leave people at that point. If they know Docker, great. If they don't know Docker, they don't need to.
Yeah, I'm interesting. Yeah, because I'd done a bit of Docker before coming across this tool, so I was sort of able to see it from both sides to some degree. That's been said. I don't work on the DevOps team. I don't work on this thing full time. But then, yeah, I guess there are engineers there who are used to running something like Lando SSH or DDEV SSH, and that SSH is into the container, for want of a better phrase. And maybe they don't see exactly what or understand what it does, what it's actually running. But I suppose that's quite a nice thing. If I just kind of go, if I find one of these, which slide was it that had? There you go. Yeah, so it does sort of show the commands that it's running. So I guess if there is a problem and people just debug, or they're particularly curious like me and want to build their own sort of version of it, like you can see what it's running. What is the command that I'm running? What is WS foobar doing on this project? They do change. Like there are different commands based on different projects for that project. I guess as I said, most of it is sort of hidden. It's hidden away as much as the command is WS something, but the files live inside the repo. So if you want to find out what it does, like it's all there in the repo. It's just probably in a different directory, so you can figure out what's going on. And most of it is configured with attributes anyway. So like we've got to think of an example, backend init steps or something, so it's like run this, do that. And like that's all in the Workspace YAML file. So people can add stuff in there if they need to, or see what it's doing. And then when apply config or whatever runs, it'll just make a file that runs and it does it from there. So I guess we're sort of implying the best practice bit is sort of behind the scenes to some degree. So as long as we can customize stuff by adding steps and adding or changing it from web to doc root or PHP 7.4 to 8, which failed. I just tried it, which of course it did because I hadn't updated in my dependencies yet. So yeah, I guess we're not going to end up in that situation where someone makes one container that does 6 things as part of their first container, which is good. But then, if they did want to do it, like, oh yeah, how does this work? Like there is a Docker compose file and a Docker file or a symphony.yaml or something. It's depending what you're using it with. It's all there in the directory if you want to go and find it. And yeah, it's like they're all, I think even the harnesses, the main images we use are all available, I believe. Somebody asked me that recently. And yeah, I believe they're all open as well. So like, it'd feel a bit strange to sort of pull in a Vika repo for like a talk or from my own site or something. So I wanted to figure it out, do it myself, and also learn a bit more about it. So yeah, but like those ones are all there as a starting point as well. So I can sort of see somebody knows a bit more about Docker than me has done, and sort of use that as some inspiration, I guess. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, in a roundabout way, I think. That's cool. I mean, it's good to know you're just learning it yourself and trying to polish your own usage of it. I just thought I'd ask the awkward questions first. So what I'm going to do is just stop our live stream onto Facebook now. So those of you who are perhaps watching there, if you want to come and join us in Zoom, then you'll be able to ask some more questions. But other than that, bye for now. Thanks very much, Oliver. And then we'll hand over to everybody else in Zoom if you want to ask any questions.